Are you here? Oh, good. And thank you for tuning in to episode number 1025 of the Paul Leslie Hour, the show featuring some of the most intriguing people of our time. You're about to meet Bruuuuce, LeVell, Trump's senior campaign surrogate in 2016, 2020, and now in 2024. Mr. Bruce LeVell is a strategist and vigorous supporter of President Donald Trump. With hundreds of media appearances to his name on television, radio, and podcasts, Mr. LeVell is also a successful businessman. And speaking of business, we'd love it if you'd subscribe to Paul Leslie's YouTube channel and also follow him on Twitter at the Paul Leslie. You can also follow Bruce LeVell on Twitter at Bruce_LeVell, and we thank you. And now it's time for Bruuuuce.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, today we're joined by Mr. Bruce LeVell. He's someone I've been excited to speak to for quite some time now, a senior advisor to the 45th President, Donald J. Trump, a strategist and frequent commentator on radio and television. Thank you so much on behalf of our audience.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. So it just seems like overnight, everything went from Biden to Kamala. It's almost like it was ready to roll or something. Do you think that Kamala Harris is easier or harder to beat for President Trump?
I think I think with the culture and the climate, what we've been dealing with, actually since Biden came out of the basement, I think it really doesn't matter who they stick up here. I think the overlying bottom line is the American people have seen how the Biden administration has weaponized the judicial system. They've seen the travesty, what's going on with the southern border, the borders in general, for that matter. They've seen their total, just their ignorance and their ability to just really deal with crime, just ignoring it. So I think it's time. I think that, as my good friend Rudy Giuliani said here on the courthouse steps here in Fulton County, is that the pendulum is swinging. And I think it's swung way back over to, obviously, President Trump and a lot of independent voters, and especially in Black culture. Look, we've seen what the contrast from the success of the Trump administration versus what's going on with the Biden-Harris, quote, Biden-Harris administration. And I think that no matter who they stick up there, especially with 100 days left to the election, this train's going too fast, so it doesn't really matter.
Interesting. I want to call everybody to the attention of just today, Tucker Carlson has published an interview with Dr. Ben Carson, and it's a deep dive on Kamala Harris. I recommend everybody check it out. But something that Dr. Carson pointed out, and I'd like to get your thoughts on, is he said, listen, nobody voted for her when she was running for president in 2020. The enthusiasm was zilch. Why is she here, if that's the case?
Yeah. Well, I've had my own theory because, I go back to the Reagan days. I'm dating myself. My first volunteer job was his campaign. Is the fact that, like I said, we're 100 days away. You're going to have to mobilize a real name ID, which, we've been running for 4 years, obviously. So, and obviously we do have a name ID in our campaign, which is the former president, soon to be the 47th. So, I think it's a tough hill for them to climb. And I think without them wanting to realize, it's like, let's just throw something and do what we can do. Let's retool and revisit this back in 2028. And so I think they're at a point where they just got to throw something up against the wall. Hopefully it can stick for 100 days. And listen, the first early voting is September 6th, I believe. And some of these states, which is not far away. So to put a real campaign apparatus up and get a particular contrast to that, how you think you can stay in this, as the DNC says, keep holding the office, it's going to be tough. So I think they realize that they're going to have to go back and retool their Democrat Party.
Interesting. As you say, it's basically 100 days, and the media has just rolled right into place. It's pretty astonishing if you think about it. Do you see the legacy media succeeding in propping her up? Do you think people will be fooled?
Well, I don't think they don't have a choice. They're going to do they're going to do what they do. They're already trying to set her up, and as I call it, they all had a huddle. The advantage we have this time is on the social media apparatus is we don't have Jack Dorsey controlling Twitter, which is now X, owned by Elon. So the messaging in the media is coming out much more fairly on the X platforms, obviously, than the fake other platforms that are out there. So that they don't have that to their advantage right there on controlling algorithms. The other thing too is there are a lot of up and coming podcasts and digital media that's out there that has the public has better access to than the traditional quote old school cable channels. So there's a lot more information that's freeing, more freely out there for the American people to see. And of course, it's more aggressive on the fake stuff too, of course. But I think the truth, you can't run from the fact that meat and vegetables and food are up 20-30%, as well as gas, as well as the interest rates. And as I say, the numbers is the American people feel in their pocketbook. So they're kind of like, okay, so do we keep going down the same path, or do we go back to what we know that was factually that worked, which is the numbers, which was under Trump administration, whether you like them or not? I think a lot of independents and a lot of people that are home can see that vast contract. They may not publicly come out and say it, but I think they want to go back in there and give President Trump another shot at the White House to get the economy back stable. And we haven't even talked about the foreign affairs. So that they see all that to President Trump's advantage.
I went to President Trump's remarks last night in Charlotte, North Carolina, and something that really, really interested me is this whole idea of no tax on tips. I
Yeah.
think pretty much everybody has been at one point in their life a
Yeah.
waiter.
Yeah.
What do you think of that idea?
Well, I think it's always a great idea when you can minimize the tax burden on any American citizen, and whoever's holding office be the best steward that they were supposed to be elected to do of the taxpayers' money. So there is a lot of connectivity. I actually wrote it last night on a Thai restaurant here in Georgia last night. No tax on tip, and the lady goes, "Huh?" She didn't even really know, and I explained it to her. She's like, "Oh yeah, that would really help." So listen, anytime there's a way to release the burdens, especially in this economy and this high inflation, to help find a way to put more money in American taxpayers' pocket to help them and their families, to feed their families, it's a win-win. So I think any idea that comes up, not the ideas that show where we need more money to grow the economy, meaning to raise taxes. So I think it's one of those brilliant ideas, and only business people and people who are out in the real world that understand what goes on day to day, especially in small business, especially it goes on with businesses and their employees.
It's it's probably one of the best ideas I've heard from a politician in years and years. You were a guest recently on the Shelley Winter Show on WSB, and I was listening to that interview, and one of the things you commented is you said, listen, I've known Donald Trump a very long time, going way back. Is there something about Donald Trump that you think people would be surprised to know?
It's interesting because I was on Fox yesterday, and I think one of the things that perplexed me more than anything is when I started, co-founded his diversity coalition in 2015, was where was this race thing coming from? And I said that because you're talking about someone that's been visible in the public eye for 40 years. We're not talking about someone just popped out of nowhere like some of these other folks have, that people are like, oh, he sounds good. This is a guy that's been out literally in the public eye, meaning when you're in the public eye, you come in contact with restaurant operators, you come in contact with limo drivers, butchers, bakers, candlestick makers, you name it. And when you're that exposed, people talk, and you come in close proxemics to people at restaurants and venues and speaking events and airline flights, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And out of those years, nobody, not one person could come forward and say, well, he said this racial derogatory thing about this, or he said, because you can't mask that kind of behavior. It comes out in some capacity in 40 years of the public eye. It's just not something that you can hold back. But lo and behold, the media had a huddle, which they're huddling up now, and said, well, let's create this thing called racism and let's sell it this way. And a lot of people bought it hook, line, and sinker. And, you know, some high level people now on certain tickets said, well, I thought it was true too. It was so convincing. So I think that's one thing that really perplexed me, that we're like, okay, this is totally the opposite of the person that I know. And remember, when you're in the hospitality industry, retail commodity industry, like President Trump, your job is to make people happy and create a good environment, where the hotels, sporting arenas, and everything. You have to make that inviting and understanding people in order to do very well. And you can't become very successful long term like he has if you're not loving people and good to people. And that's, speak for myself, with 29 years of business. So that right there is always like, wow, they really pulled the biggest lie off outside of the fake Russian hoax collusion. That was the biggest lie that they pitched in the nation's history, of calling him a racist.
Very interesting. Very
Yep.
interesting. What motivates you, Mr. LeVell, to do this work?
You know, I think I'm one of 30.6 million small businesses, and we make up 60 plus percent of the GDP. So it means every quarter, my quarterly payroll taxes, that I have to be the agent of the IRS and send them off to the IRS. I have to pay my sales tax monthly. I got to pay my occupational tax annually to the city. You know, I got to pay my inventory tax annually. So the list goes on and on and on. So obviously I'm paying attention to numbers. So I'm a numbers guy historically. I like to say I'm fiscally conservative because I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican, quite frankly. So anything that looks to me that doesn't look right on the balance sheet, those get my attention. So anyone, he or she, who's running city council, state house, Congress, Senate, if you're talking a really good policy-oriented pitch to get my vote, and everything is about minimizing and being good stewards of the taxpayers' money, you got my attention. Anything that talks about growing jobs and you're looking at raising taxes, you got to go away. So I guess for me, most small businesses, I know a lot of my colleagues, we pay close attention because we're numbers people. So numbers look good. People speak about policies that make numbers good. For my bottom line, you got my attention. I'm voting for you. So that's what's always kept me involved, was, as my old mentor said, pay attention to the numbers, not the emotions. The emotions make you make bad business decisions. And so I live by that. And so does President Trump. So we have a lot in common, a lot of us. So that's what we're not emotional people about noise and rhetoric. We're only emotional about high taxes and over regulations of government.
Very quick, does your gut tell you that Kamala will be on the ticket?
Yeah, I think they're in a catch-22. They played the pandering game. They tried to check the box, and now they realize that, you know, we can't just push this Black woman off the ticket. With a 14+% voting population in the U.S. is the Black culture, let alone they got 91% or 92% of the Black vote in 2020. So they're looking at numbers like, we just can't throw her to the side. So let's try to balance it out with a good running mate. So that's what they're scrambling around right now, and try to create some ticket that go into the 100 days to try to save face, to try to throw up against the wall. Hopefully we get lucky. But like I said, you know, the cat's out of the bag on inflation and the mass invasion of illegal immigration, as well as a lot of the lie, cheat, and deceit that they've been caught during that administration, and weaponizing the judicial system. So it's going to be hard to come off of that. So I think the DNC is going to have to retool and come back and revisit their apparatus for 2028.
So, Mr. LeVell, I'll give you the last word. What would you like to say to anyone tuned in with us?
You know, for me, I think things in business perspective. So regardless of how you feel, or I always say, don't get caught in that emotional rhetoric, is look very close at the numbers. Does he want to cut taxes and bring back the tax cuts? Yes. Does he want to have strong borders, which minimizes the strain on Social Security? I'm a baby boomer. As many of us out there, we're the largest influx of elderly people, if we live that long, to go into that system where we don't even have adequate nurses, let alone will we have enough money. So the wasted money and overseas and everywhere that doesn't come back to our infrastructure and our Social Security system. That's what I say. Look at the numbers and ask yourself, if God grants me ability to live 10, 15 more years, what does that look like? Does the policy of what's going on with the Biden-Kamala side, does that show sustainability? Or does maybe the ideas that President Trump had when in his tenure have a better future for my children's children? And that's all you have to do without getting caught up in all the Democrat, Republican emotional stuff. Remove the emotions and look at the numbers. That's it.
Wise words. Well, Mr. LeVell, thank you so much.
All right, man.
Pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
We thank you and appreciate you dropping in for the Paul Leslie Hour today. You know, you can help the Paul Leslie Hour in our mission to provide independent media content like this by visiting www.thepaulleslie.com/support. We truly thank you. This is your announcer speaking. Performance of The Entertainer intro song and Corina outro song, courtesy of John Primorano. Well, that's it for today. So until next time, be safe and be good.